welcome to everyone here, to everyone who might be watching on Facebook. We're glad to have you. I found this poem. It's called Undivided. I am for one world undivided, one world without fear and corruption, one world ruled by truth and justice. I am for one peaceful world for all, where hate has been overcome by love and everyone is guided only by their conscience. It was written by Susie Hessam. And I thought these ideas all sounded so good until I wondered about how my conscience, imperfect as it might be, might differ from someone else's, perhaps a person with a dubious character. How can we work together to come to like-minded ends where love conquers all and the world is in keeping with each other's hopes and dreams, when our consciences might be leading us in different directions, taking us to different ends? Just a thought. Let us sing. And souls. Speak to us of your love. Speak to us of your call to be loving. Speak to us of your call to be a living community of faith. Then open our hearts and ears to listen and give us the courage and the will to respond in faith. And to begin, we add the words that Jesus gave us in song and bring us into a unified community. Do it, Norma and Ian. I couldn't sing Onward Christian Soldiers. No, I almost did it, but then I couldn't. So just keep that thought in your head about Christian soldiers marching off to war and killing and stuff. Okay, so the amendment to our fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother. Fulfillment in life is the result of the effort we have made to exemplify the best qualities of our ancestors. That sound good? Is there another one? Yes. Honor those who enrich you by loving you and encouraging you to develop your full potential. Oh. So, there's another. Okay, now we're on to the sixth commandment. Thou shalt not kill. So those are just 4 little words. I think it's the shortest commandment. But it's the one so far that I have struggled with. And I think it should be pretty cut and dried, especially if we change the word kill to murder, as some suggest. I think murder gives us a much clearer picture of what was originally intended with this commandment, the taking of a life in an unjustified way. But if we look back at the First Testament stories, we're often taken aback when God seems to be instructing the Israelites to take the lives of their adversaries, those in their way to gaining access to Canaan, because sometimes it seemed to include even the innocent, the children, the women, the elderly. I use the word seemed because there has been a lot written explaining that it really wasn't about the taking of the lives, the murdering of the people, but more about God wanting to eradicate the evil practices that those people were engaged in. Some people would equate this commandment and the term murder with abortion, taking the life of an unborn child. There's a fine line between these two terms, murder and kill. I mean, I was thinking, what if wartime killings that have had men and women returning home from war, suffering forever from PSTD? How to eradicate the memory in them of taking someone's life, even if there are just war justifications for taking another's life, even if they are innocent collateral damage. Anyway, let's keep the word kill instead of murder, because I think this opens up a whole range of ideas that aren't about the physical taking of another person's life, but are more in line with how we and others might be in the killing game, albeit maybe unintentionally. So this is a question time. kill something in another person. What can we kill? And we don't go home, we don't go downstairs until we've had 5 people answer. Yes, Betty?
Hope.
Who?
Hope. We can kill hope.
We can kill hope, yeah.
We can kill someone's spirit.
Spirit? Mm-hmm.
Self-respect.
Self-respect.
That's 3.
Pardon?
I think that's 3.
That's right.
That's quite popular.
And Betty keeps putting up her hand. It's kind of desperate. Anybody else? Come on.
Confidence.
Confidence, yes. Confidence, yes.
Relationships.
Relationships, yeah. What about our earth? Climate change.
Yeah.
Plant life, trees, the quality of our air and water.
Basically, the quality of life.
Quality, just plain quality of life, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Dishonor, diminish our Indigenous brothers and sisters' lives. Take their culture from them, kill their culture, their language. There's so much. So many things. You'll probably all think of it later this afternoon. All these hopes and all these things that we can't kill in another person. So the proposed amendment, back there. We respect life as being sacred in all its forms, which have dignity and beauty. I can already pick holes in that, but it's a start. It's a start. It's a start. I expect to see more emails or messages coming in. Messages are better, not emails. Yeah, I've got my emails down to 1 day a week. I don't bother looking at them. So, yeah. So we might try it. Message is better. Yeah. So think on that one. Yeah. And let's sing. For the most part, I don't choose to read books that will leave me depressed. Sad about the state of the world, where one person dominates another, crushing their spirits and hopes and dreams, where people's rights are taken from them, where people are divided with each group claiming to be right, and there seems to be no way to resolve their differences. I think that's escapism, isn't it? Really, sort of sad. So it makes really no sense that I stuck with today's gospel reading. Jesus talks about destructive fire, stress, division, judgment. I want to sit at the feet of Jesus, who talks about living in a community where we care for one another, where we comfort those who are troubled, where we forgive those who haven't always toed the line. Unfortunately, with him, we have to take the whole package. So listen as Randy shares these uncomfortable words.
Uncomfortable indeed. As you can see on the screen, this week's scripture is from Luke chapter 12, verses 49 to 56. I have come to start a fire on this earth. How I wish it were blazing right now. I've come to change everything, turn everything right side up. How I long for it to be finished. Do you think I have come to smooth things over and make everything nice? Not so. I've come to disrupt and confront. From now on, when you find 5 in a house, it will be 3 against 2, 2 against 3, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother against bride, mother-in-law against bride, bride against mother-in-law. Then he turned to the crowd. When you see clouds coming in the west, you say, storm's coming. And you're right. When you see the wind comes out of the south, you say, this will be a hot one. And you're right. Frauds, you know how to tell a change in the weather, so don't tell me you can't tell a change in the season. The God season we're in right now. And in these sacred words of old, may we hear the Spirit speaking to us anew.
So Jesus is facing a pretty large crowd. And as is often the case when there's a large audience, not everyone is on the same page. They arrive with their own views and opinions. Here we have some of Jesus' devoted followers, the male disciples and the women who supported his ministry. Then there are those on the opposite end of the spectrum who actively work against Jesus' teachings, like the Pharisees and the other temple officials. In between, there's a huge, large majority who probably fell into the category of just wanting to know what the big deal is with this itinerant preacher who's on the front page of the Jerusalem Times so often these days. For them, the question is, should I get on the bandwagon, be part of the in-group that, led by Jesus, will challenge the establishment, bringing Rome down and freeing Israel? Or do I cozy up to the synagogue officials who are always watching over and judging me on how I'm living my life and can make my life hell if I fall short? So what to do? What to do? Well, Jesus doesn't pussyfoot around. He starts to call the herd. And it's very easy. He says some things that would be hard for many of them to accept. And as a result, divisions will form. And he warns them. And they do. He talks in terms of family, but it's a lot bigger than that. And many leave. Because he's asking too much of them, demanding them to give too much. Remember the rich young man who obeyed all the commandments but couldn't give up his riches so that he could gain eternal life? Some of them go back to their communities and their friends and their family with stories about what a whack job this man is. He's a crazy man, some weird ideas. Give Rome what belonged to it, and they have to suffer for it? And then there are the Pharisees. They begin with the slow burn soon after he begins. In the end, they condemn him because he clearly isn't part of their establishment. When Jesus asks if there are any questions, some express their doubts, but others nod, feeling that what he's saying seems to ring true. So they stay most of the time, trying to keep their minds and hearts open. And they talk amongst themselves, they discuss. But we know from historical accounts that there even ended up being divisions among these people. People who remained committed to his teachings and his ministry. Because after Jesus died, right away there were problems. We have Peter and James and Paul, and the three of them were divided. There's a lot written about how and why. Who would be the leader? If Peter was the rock on whom this church was built, how come James is said to be the leader in Jerusalem? He wasn't even one of the original 12. He wasn't even in the running to replace Judas. So how did he come up from behind to be in that spot? And what of Paul? He didn't even know Jesus firsthand, but he gets great billing for his expounding on how the church should behave. There were arguments over whether the new church was only for Jews, or could the Gentiles get in? What would they have to do to qualify? Oh, the church experienced divisions very early on. Peter and Paul had a parting of ways while they still recognized their common faith. Though separated with Paul off in the diaspora, he even helped with Jerusalem financial needs. He and his people took up a collection among them and they sent it back to them. They agreed to disagree and each ministered in their own way. Barnabas and Mark came to disagree with Paul, and they struck out on their own. The extra-canonical Gospel of Peter suggests that he had little use for Mary Magdalene. Being a woman, she would never be accorded any kind of leadership role, even though she had been there at the very end when all the others had fled. I really wish that the writer of Luke's Gospel had given his work to a good editor before it got published. Consider it was written about 50 to 55 years after Jesus died. Maybe some of the words of the oral tradition passed down just might have gotten a little twisted up. I think a good editor might have pointed out that maybe Jesus meant to say, "You want peace? How I wish I could give it to you. It's what God wants, but I'm afraid what I'm going to say will cause more division than peace. At least until you begin to listen to one another and are not so self-centered." We know that what Jesus had to say caused divisions. From the very beginning of his ministry, right down to his final breath, and then continuing through the centuries to the church that remains today. Divisions have always been part of the church's life. Sadly, it has often been as a result of a few. They were the ones who needed to hold power and have control, wanted to be seen as being on the side of the discussion that supported their views, the right views. Some opted to lead through intimidation. If you don't do this or that, you will live in eternal damnation. The wording may have changed, but those beliefs are still being asserted. The love, the compassion, the seeking of justice Jesus taught and expected of his followers to exemplify soon took a back seat to creeds and dogmas and rituals. People were excluded, they were exiled, tortured, murdered because of divisions. Families were torn apart, countries were divided. One church became many churches, and those many churches became denominations, and those denominations divided into many others. So these words we heard today were written. It's almost as if Jesus is saying, this is fine, it's to be expected. So what good are these few verses? Did they just affirm what we already know? What we're experiencing today? Because surely we live in a polarized world. This reading almost seems to fan the flames and say, it's fine the way things are. Jesus okayed it as the norm. I have come to bring division. And he seems to have. And God's people have never looked back, almost relishing the controversies that caused and are causing splits. And it's not just in church. Look at where politics takes people in most countries, ours included. And people love to argue and condemn each other on social media. If we agreed 95% of the time on major issues, we'd still be judged as not doing well. People love to find fault with the other 5% and the other 5% of the time. But people don't agree on such piddly issues sometimes. They, maybe even we, love to speak ill of one another if they or we can't or can. And this can tear up families and friendships and faith communities. So does this reading provide us with any help or hope? Jesus doesn't seem to have helped matters. He appears to be the ultimate divider. There's no room for moderation or ecumenism. The issue's black and white, true or false, in and out, and dare we say saved and unsaved. And following Jesus meant the possibility of condemnation from Gentile or Jewish families or friends. One needed to stay strong when others condemned them. Martyrdom was a possibility. It was no different down through the centuries, and it's no different today. These are hard words to hear. One theologian admitted that there are preachers who will just love this passage. Somewhere, there is a minister who feels quite justified in railing against their congregation's lukewarm attitudes on social and theological issues that don't match with the rightness of their own position. Such ministers will likely soon find their righteousness is divisive in their congregations and dangerous to their own pastoral positions. But we can be no different at times. Facebook is a great place to find this type of self-righteousness expressed. Some people like to set right all those ignoramuses out there about certain issues of faith and politics, for better or for worse, because they seem so intertwined. Their obtuseness, their ignorance and prejudices irritate readers and create divisions. They want and love to point out the error of another's ways. They create the us and the them order with themselves on the top, on the right side of the divide. So do we like divisions? I hope not. Do we work to close them up? Perhaps, but it's hard to do. Do we try to prevent them by putting aside our own viewpoints when we listen to others? We need to be open to looking for any truth to be found in positions with which we disagree. We need to realize that there is actually a chance that our own viewpoints just might be flawed and may seem disturbing to other people of good faith. The best we can do, I suppose, is to try our best. Never to be the instigator of a division, to put a wedge between friend or foe, to loose the ties that bind us in family as friends, as Christians, as children of God. The best we can do is to agree to disagree and get on serving as faithfully as we can based on what we believe to be true. Because as we do that, we'll continue the journey with the Spirit hovering over us, trusting that God is at work in our lives, that our openness to God will always be giving us new insight. of our congregations. It all seems so easy, doesn't it? Let's sing. Gifted, we gift in return. Let us ask for a blessing on what we have brought to share. In a world so full of what is wonderful, ever changing, ever surprising us with life's power and beauty, may we accept with gratitude all that gladdens us, and with fortitude all that brings us grief. Let us be learning always from all that we see and do, and from all that happens to us. Amen. Since the kids are actually going back to university and college, we'll resume our gifts to them. And so if anyone is anybody going off to school themselves here? No. If there are any grandchildren going off to university or college, let me know their names, okay? And we will gift them. The trip to Ville Marie on Wednesday, if anybody would like to go with us, we're going to meet outside here at 9:30 in the morning, and we'll probably get back around 3, maybe 3:30 somewhere. Yeah. And I hope that we'll take down the check to Zach's crib and present it on our way down to Eve at the shop. And what's her name? Sylvia has made a lovely we have a house, an odd house, maybe that big, and it has 2, and then Sylvia has done some wonderful calligraphy with Zach's crib and $10,000 and a little bed on the bottom. Yeah, so maybe this is
And like background.
yeah, so anyway, that's our goal. Lily and Kent had a stroke yesterday, and so her daughter phoned me, and we'd had such a lovely visit the week before. We sat out on our side porch and watched the birds flit around, and we had a wonderful time. But her major concern was as the ambulance was taking her out of the house, and she wasn't speaking quite well, and her son was struggling to understand her, but he finally got it, and she was concerned that she hadn't made out her givings envelope. Lillian, so please keep her in your prayers. They were going to take her up to do a scan in Kirkland Lake. Yeah. On a more pleasant note, this must have been a time to get married. A number of years ago, So, because we have 3 anniversaries this week, Dot and Andy are celebrating 64, Ed and Vi are 59, and Lois and Dawn are young 57. So Dot and Andy, where did you get married? Dot and Andy, where did you get married?
In the Anglican Church.
Here in town? Okay. Ed and Vi? Ed and Vi? Where did you get married?
In the manse at Curry's, Ontario, which is just out of Woodstock.
In the manse, okay. And Lois and Dawn?
Here, in the manse.
In the manse.
In your house.
In my house? Oh, really? Okay. Oh, okay. Memories. Great. Well, have a good week. I understand you're having a festivity later this afternoon.
Yeah.
The 3 of them. Okay, wonderful. Lois, would you like to read our Presbyterian mission moment?
Good morning, everyone. This is the Presbyterian Mission Moment. The Raw Carrot Soup enterprise is growing a social enterprise. It's doing so much more than making soup. It's changing lives by employing individuals living with disabilities and mental illness. Megan is one of the many people who have found meaningful employment at the Raw Carrot. Her work has helped her to gain confidence and skills and to feel proud of who she is and what she can contribute. Megan is a huge Raw Carrot fan. As she put it, the world should have more raw carrots, not just because they make good soup, but because it's a good place to work. With support from the Presbyterians, sharing the raw carrot is transforming lives.
Is there anything else we need to share?
I have a new granddaughter,
Who's that?
Brian.
Brian, your granddaughter, and?
She was born Monday, and
Okay.
she's beautiful.
And what, oh, there it is. Okay, and what's your name?
Adeline,
A-D-A-L-I-N-E.
L-Y-N-D-E.
And
D-E.
D.
I've asked him many times because I spelled it about 10 wrong times.
Okay. Adeline.
Adeline.
Adeline. Okay.
Adeline, Dorothy, Darlene. I should put Dorothy.
Oh, okay. And let us pray. Loving and gracious God of all nations, you love justice and you hate oppression. You give peace to those who seek it. You condemn violence wherever it is in your creation. Surround us with a great cloud of living witnesses to inspire us, that we may have the faith to live by your word in our time, and the courage and the endurance to persevere as we face the problems of the world and our own worries and sorrows. May it never matter who they are, how old or young they are, how well educated, even what faith tradition they belong to, because ultimately we are all your children, aligning as best as we try our lives with your plans. So hold us all in the palm of your hand. While we've been counseled to let you be the judge of all, we often find ourselves playing that role. Remind us to first judge ourselves according to Jesus' teachings, and to be willing to find ourselves at fault, ignorant of the truth. But if we must judge, may your Spirit nudge us to make sure we know all the facts, to be open to considering another's opinions, to hear all voices, to explore all possibilities for what is the truth. May we be gracious in our sharing of Christ's wisdom and teaching, especially in all that we're called to do. love God with all our passion and prayer and intelligence, and to love others as well as we love ourselves. May all we do and say and think reflect these two things. We keep in our prayers those known and unknown to us, who are struggling with worries and concerns. We can often only begin to appreciate the seriousness of. Those recovering from surgery, those newly diagnosed, who along with their partners are uncertain about what the future holds. Those who are in fractured relationships and are frightened to make decisions about the future. Those who are victims of tragedies in all corners of the world, especially those in a church in Cairo this morning who, while worshiping, died. We keep in our prayer Linda, Lois's sister, who over the past few years has always been fighting for better health, fighting to recover. And she finds once more that she is in a great deal of pain, so be with her, touch her, bless her, and those who are caring for her. Be with Lillian and those caring for her. May she know that we are thinking of her and wish her a speedy recovery as best that can happen. And Adeline Dorothy, may she be a light to the world. And may some of the genes that she passes on come from her grandmother. May her laughter be shared all her life, and may she be a light to the world with it in mind. We give thanks for witnesses past and those in the present. May they and we who are among them continue to feel inspired and enthused in our ministries. May we never be brought low by the refusal of others to consider the harder path which needs to be taken as we care for your world and for the people that have to live with never enough. We celebrate with joy those slivers of joy which are always signs of hope. Gardens in bloom, an afternoon on the lake, the sweet taste of corn on the cob, the drive in the country, time with family, a walk on a night in the full moon, pets who comfort us, friends who support us. All these things and others we are grateful for, and hopefully we feel called to spread our joy and love with others, as you have called on us to do. Amen. We're going to use a tune of Amazing Grace, but to other words. During the hymn book, but Norma just refused to play it, the tune. So really, she has Amazing Grace. But we're going to sort of sing it a little quicker. branches of the dawn enliven our spirits. May the rising of the sun enlighten our minds. May the noontide of the day warm our hearts. And may the sunset clothe us with restfulness. Let's sing. You remember that first one, right? Who's the first quote from? All for one and one for all? Who? The Three Musketeers. That's right. Oh, look at what, honestly, there's something happening in my life. The last 3 weeks has gone somewhere. I don't know where it goes. Okay, so it says, we divided ourselves among caste and creed and culture and countries, but what is undivided remains most valuable, a mere smile and a love.